Hello and welcome. It's time to answer our special program of World Insight at the 2023 World Economic Forum. Sustainability is a buzzword that can be heard in nearly every corner of Davos, but carrying it out needs collaboration among all, including governments, businesses, and public. Sustainability is also the mission of Roberto Azevedo, who is committed to decarbonization. The former Director General of the World Trade Organization is now working in the private sector as the chairman of the board of the directors of PepsiCo Foundation. I've spoken to him exclusively about the role of business in this regard and what impact will the dialogue between Chinese and the U.S. officials had on the global free trade. Mr. Azevedo, what a pleasure to see you here.
It's a pleasure to be back. Thank you for inviting me.
Let me ask you about your interpretation of the theme cooperation in the fragmented world. To you, what does that say?
It says exactly what we need at this point in time. The types of challenges that we have before us. You look at the halls and the meeting rooms, we're talking about momentous things like climate change or social inequalities, sustainability. All these things, they're big tasks. They're big tasks for companies, they're big tasks for society, they're big tasks for the political establishment, for the financial system, for everyone. Whatever goals you set for yourself, more often than not, you cannot do it yourself.
Businesses are global. Therefore, what is the role likely from your perspective of businesses? You are now working for PepsiCo, and you've been talking throughout your professional career, both world leaders in global governance and now to business leaders right now for cooperation. So what exactly to you is the role of business, for example, reflected by PepsiCo?
Well, the business cannot wait for all the stars to align before they begin to react, right? So we cannot wait for politicians to figure out what we need to do about climate change, or what do we need to do about sustainability, what do we need to do about waste management. All those things need a sense of urgency. And I think businesses can do that right away. They don't have to wait for political guidance, they don't have to wait for consensus. They can begin to do these things
like
right
what?
away. For example, climate change. How long is it taking for governments to internalize the goals that they committed to?
And implement.
Yeah, it's taking years, decades.
Ages.
Yeah.
So what about for businesses? From your own perspective, what have you done as a business in terms of decarbonization? How do you avoid, perceptions about businesses so-called doing greenwashing?
Yeah, so two different questions. I think the first one is, first of all, the business has to understand that contributing to the planet and to society is not just the right thing to do. It's important for the business to survive itself. The greenwashing argument is very important because it depends, first, how you define greenwashing. So some people say greenwashing is you are doing things, but you don't know or you don't show how exactly you're going to do it. You don't have very exact targets. I think if we wait until we have every technology in place, every government policy in place, we're never going to get there. So it's more important that we undertake the commitments, that we set the goals, and we begin to do it. And we begin to do it right away.
You see, over the past few months, the world's global governance seems to come to a certain kind of consensus to move forward, at least somewhat. At the G20, related to B20, of course. At the APEC, related to it, the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting and the APEC CEO Summit. And this time now at the World Economic Forum, businesses are going to play their roles. But let me ask you a little bit further on how you see business play their roles, particularly emerging and developing countries. You yourself originally coming from an emerging economy. And I am based in an emerging economy, China, even though it's one of the largest economies in the world. So how do you see businesses working with governments and stakeholders in these economies as they are becoming ever more important growing engine, but at the same time vulnerable to different realities?
Yeah, I think the situation of businesses in developing countries is absolutely critical for a solution. Developing countries can no longer be expected to be driving the global economy like it did, after the crisis in 2008, 2009. And the solution was developing countries, and a lot of hope and expectation was put on them. I think they need help. Developing countries are an essential part of the solution, but in order to, for example, to get farmers in developing countries, in China, in Brazil, in Africa, in so many countries in Africa, they want to move towards more sustainable practices. But those sustainable practices, for example, I'm giving just one example, they need financing. There are costs involved in transitioning from the traditional methods of production to regenerative or sustainable methods of production. That kind of financial assistance needs to come from the countries who can provide that, from the financial system, from developed economies. And that is absolutely possible and necessary and essential. If there is no cooperation, if there is no help coming from one side of the equation to the other, this is never going to happen.
You have been hearing over the past few weeks and months, particularly since the big political meeting taking place in China, advocacy about the strong voices about development is still the priority. Strong voices about reform and opening up. These are not just slogans, it's ingrained in people's mind over the past 4 decades. So what about companies like yours looking at the potential of growth of the Chinese economy and the role you might be playing, of course, given the complexity of the world we are facing today?
Yeah, well, one important part of development is that it's not any type of development, right? It's high quality development.
That's very true.
Yeah, and PepsiCo is all about high quality growth and development, bearing in mind the impact that it has on the planet. And China, I know, is very committed to that impact as well. The people that we work with, this is also very important. We work very closely with the community. It's all about sustainable development and growth. This is exactly the kind, it aligns very closely to the kind of mindset that you just described.
5.5% GDP growth, that's likely to be of China for the year 2023. Now, 1/3 of the world's economy, according to IMF, might be running into the risks of going into recession. Therefore, what about the role of the Chinese economy? How multinational companies like the one you represent see the role of China?
Well, China is a key player in the global economy, of course, because of the size of the economy, because of the interactivity that it has with the global economy. If we go around the halls here in Davos today, many questions are about what is in store. What is the economy going to be like in the next year or two? What are central banks going to do? How is inflation going to behave? How is that going to impact the economic environment for developing countries, for developed economies, for companies in particular? All those questions are very important. And
we need answers. We need answer.
Yeah, I think we are not. We have seen rosier scenarios in the past. I am not an alarmist. I don't think that we are going to see a big recession, global recession, or anything of the kind. I don't think anybody's thinking about that. But I think we should be careful. We should be careful because the global economy is more sensitive today than it was before. And if we, on top of that, we add geopolitical crisis, if we add more uncertainties in terms of natural disasters and things like that, all those things contribute negatively. I think we need to pick up the positives, and everyone that can contribute by doing something positive for the environment, for society, should do that, because the economy requires every help that we can give everyone.
The latest information we got is the trade rep of U.S. is likely to meet with the Vice Minister of Commerce from China on the sideline of the World Economic Forum. Now, of course, you're not from the government. I wouldn't let you to comment about that. But to you and your company, global company like yours, how important is the role of trade to make sure it works efficiently and healthily?
Governments have different views. They sometimes have very striking differences in the political approach to issues, to problems. But at the end of the day, they need to talk to each other, they need to understand the differences, and they need to help each other in a way that the global economy, that the global society benefits. We, as a company, as a global company, what we want is a stable economy, stable political and economic conditions that allow for us to create employment, to create growth, to create value. And that, I think, is a win-win scenario. So as far as we can help have a more stable, open, with fluid dialogue international scenario, we're going to work for that.
My last question for you, Roberto. It's so much pleasure to see you here because I remember dearly, it was years ago when you were still bidding for the Director General of the World Trade Organization. You went to many economies to talk to their leaders, including to China.
Yeah.
And I remembered the visions you set at the time running up to your Director General role. Now, you yourself have been transforming from governance, governments, international organization, now to business world. What is your biggest personal takeaway? How you graduate from the fact that the world is really fragmented, and you probably experienced it in person.
Throughout my career as an ambassador for one country, for Brazil at the time, or as Director General of the World Trade Organization, it was very clear to me that we needed to build bridges, that distances that looked, or differences that look absolutely incompatible, we could reconcile those. We could find common ground. We could find a solution somehow. Sometimes problems that looked unsolvable, we would find a solution. But that takes dialogue, that takes a lot of effort, that takes building bridges, talking to one, talking to another.
Not burning them, building them.
Not burning, building, always building bridges. And building bridges is not easy because you have to be open to listen. Yeah. You have to be open to listen to one side, listen to the other, understand the differences, your own vision, right? Because you're part of the conversation. If you have those skills and if you understand that those differences can be bridged somehow, those skills are very important. And I bring that, I think, to the position that I am today. As I said earlier, inside the borders, we have a lot of work to do. We have to build bridges inside the country. We have to build bridges across borders with other countries as well.
Roberto Azevedo, what a pleasure to see you once again.
My pleasure.
All the best to you, your loved ones.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And happy new lunar year,
yes,
right? Coming
exactly.
Up, yeah. Happy New Year to all of you. And I hope the year of the rabbit will bring wonderful things to you, and like the rabbit, will bring them really fast to you. And I hope to see you soon. I'm planning to visit China as soon as possible, so that's a plan that I intend to make true and real very soon. Thank you all.